Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Rausam Pereira. Amid escalating tension between India and Pakistan over the abrogation of the special status of Jammu and Kashmir, Air Chief Marshal B.S. Dhanoa on Tuesday said that the Indian Air Force is still flying 44-year-old MiG-21 Russian fighter jets. MiG-21s have been the most accident-prone of all IAF fighter jets, thus earning the name Flying Coffin. Speaking at an IAF seminar in New Delhi, Dhanoa said that the basic version of the Russian fighter jet would be phased out this year. He also said that the IAF is replacing high-end obsolete weapons with indigenously developed ones that will boost in-house defense manufacturing. However, to win a war, we also need high-end, high-tech items which we need to import, is what he added. From 1963 to 2015, the MiG-21 has had a total of 210 accidents. Of these, a maximum of 16 accidents took place in 1999. India is currently the largest operator of MiG-21 Bison with an estimated 100 plus aircrafts on duty. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze the need to modernize the Indian Air Force. Joining me on the program today are Air Vice Marshal P.K. Srivastav, retired defense expert, Ajay Banerjee, defense correspondent, The Tribune, and Ratan Srivastav, advisor, aerospace and defense. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. AVM, I'd like to begin the program with you. Let's first try and analyze and talk about what is the need as far as the IAF is concerned. At what level do we need modernization?
See, our modernization need for any armed forces, particularly in this case for the Indian Air Force, is a derivative of the threat perception, as we have calculated a threat, and what kind of future wars we are going to fight, undertake. So when we talk about the modernization, normally in public domain we are talking about the fighter aircraft with respect to Indian Air Force, but it's not limited to fighter aircraft itself. You're looking at the doctrine, which has now become two-front war policy. You're also looking at net-centric warfare. That is one of the things. You're looking at aerospace kind of Indian Air Force, which can take care of space assets, or it can couple or build in airspace assets into its war domain. And you're looking at offensive ops capability, wherein fighter aircrafts would dominate. You're also looking at air defense ops capability, where missile network or a national missile defense network will dominate. Then apart from these, you're looking at force multipliers. You'll have force multipliers like air-to-air refuelers. You'll have force multipliers like AWACS. You'll also have force multipliers like ops, logistics, communication networks. All these will factor in making a modern Indian Air Force that can undertake a future air war or can protect airspace, which is very vast. So if you look at from that perspective, what Air Chief brought out in terms of the MiG-21s, the story is known to and is very much in the public domain, and we have been trying to replace. If I give and take, let's say there is a 42 squadron strength for fighter aircraft sanctioned. If 42 squadron strength will translate roughly to about 900 fighter aircraft. By 2030, with the retiring of MiG-21s, 27s and all upgraded versions of Jaguars, Mirages, etc., you will be in a position of having only 500 aircraft if you do not really induct any more aircraft what you want to do. And the induction rate is much slower than the retirement rate. So if you take this perspective in view, you find you're looking at a gap of around 400 aircraft. And let's compare it with the previous situation. In 1980s or up until 1990, as far as Indian Air Force was concerned, it has 3:1 kind of superiority in numbers over the Pakistan Air Force. Now we're talking of two-front war. You got about 450 fighter aircraft that side, you got 1700 fighter aircraft this side, and you will be having just about 500 unless you very quickly update your inventory to 900.
Sure.
That is one part of the game. But there's another part of the game, what kind of aircraft we need. It has to be tiered. Do I need all aircraft of Rafale kind? No, I need some aircraft which are lightweight. I need some aircraft which play a higher role. Then there's a nuclear doctrine to add on to. With all that, what is my requirement to modernize? And the modernization of Indian Air Force is a very vast subject.
Sure.
For this discussion, I don't know, Frank, you want to limit it to fighter aircraft only, or you want to talk about all of them? Then it's a really, really very interesting game.
I don't think we'll do justice if we try to cover everything in just half an hour.
So I'll just quickly tell you where Air Force has really progressed. Where Air Force really progressed. As far as ops logistics is concerned, Air Force has already implemented integrated materials management online system. So Air Force is there. It's not that modernization is going on, which is not so visible. Then as far as net centricity is concerned, Air Force already has integrated air command and control system, ISCCS. It is there already. As far as your air refueling is concerned, it is being taken care of. As far as your the other force multiplier, AVAX is concerned, is being taken care of. And on the missile front, we have got this strategic missile segment, which is in which we are good. We are doing very well, and everyone is aware of it. Whether you talk of Agni 1 to Agni 5, and the ranges, and Prithvi, and for that there is a separate command, Strategic Forces Command.
Sure.
Right. So, and for the other tiered and layered defense, we got LR-SAMs, we got Akash for MR-SAM, we got other missiles dovetailed. We also have BrahMos, which is indigenous. But if you really ask me for modernization, the greatest challenge for the country is, we should have now indigenous inventory as far as possible.
Okay.
That's where he emphasized.
Absolutely.
What Chief emphasized, that you want to have modernization, but you have to couple this modernization with indigenous capability.
Absolutely. That's something that we'll talk about, and we'll take this particular theme forward as well, because that's something that this government has been talking about for the last 6 years too, talking about Make in India and how we should, give that a fillip and a push. Ajay Banerjee, like the AVM has just pointed out, it's not like upgradation has not taken place or modernization has not taken place, but what kind of upgradation has taken place over the last decade or 2 decades or so, and at what level has it been?
See, I'll paint a picture of the past 15 years. First of all, we have now added the heavy lift helicopters, the Chinook, which have been inducted in Chandigarh. The Apache new attack helicopters have come in. They will be based in Pathankot. And the Rafale is coming in September. There will be one squadron will be based in Ambala. We have added a satellite. The Air Force now has dedicated satellite. We have added AVAX, that means airborne surveillance radars, which were actually used during Balakot quite intensively to capture the images of Pakistan Air Force doing whatever they were trying to do. And we have also as Sir has pointed out, Srivastava Sir has pointed out, regards to the integrated air control systems. These are very important systems. They look like some jargon. They're very important systems because, see, this air battle over Nowshera, today is in public domain, that's why I'm revealing, was being controlled from Ambala. Now, Ambala is like 600 kilometers from Nowshera. When Abhinandan Vartaman went down, the controllers were sitting in Ambala. So if tomorrow Ambala is hit, the controller can be in Barnala or in Delhi also. It's all networked and connected. That is the modernization which has taken place. Okay. On the infrastructure front, the Air Force has had a project called the MAFI. That is the modernization of airfield infrastructure. 30 of the airfields have been upgraded to all-weather 24/7 flying capabilities, with all network-centric capabilities available in those 30 airfields, which is a huge number. Yes, we have to have new fighter jets. That is the only worry at the moment, in my opinion, which is the immediate short-term worry which we have is the fighter jets. Now, how do we go about it? We have been about it for the past 19 years. Since 2000, the first Air Force proposal was to have Mirage 2000S aircraft, which was not okayed, and we all know the MMRC project started and it fell down, and 36 Rafale came in. Now, what we need, frankly, is that we need to have some kind of foreign tie-up coming in. As Srivastava Sir pointed out, we need a multiplicity, several verticals coming in of twin-engine, single-engine and multiple capacity aircraft, fighter jets I'm talking about. Now, we have to have some foreign tie-up. The Tejas is moving very slow. It is around 12 aircraft per year, and which does not meet our requirements. 12 aircraft per year, I must break it down for your viewers, would mean something like 10 years to make 120 aircraft. 123 of those have been made. That'll be 10 years by the time technology would have taken another leap. So do we need pace? Yes, we need a lot of pace. We need at least three lines going at the moment, three construction lines going at the moment. Now, that cannot be done from public money. Invite a foreign vendor, let him or her make it, meet your requirement, allow it to export. That, my opinion, should be the shortcut or the short-term goal, Frank.
Okay, all right. And that having been said, Ratan Srivastava, is it time to open up the aeronautical industry as far as the defense sector is concerned to the industry as well, so that we have them coming into the picture and contributing too?
So Frank, I would like to bring this into a different perspective, incorporating of what the AVM said and what Ajay also said. So I see the problem in three facets. First is the perspective plan, which is to say, when we know we have an aircraft and every aircraft has a calendar life, which is to say that it would have a lifespan of 30 years or 36 years or whatever. When we buy the machine, we know this is the life it will have with upgrades, right? The next part of it is the technology development roadmap. And the third is the industry production or the manufacturing aspect. So if I take these three one by one, the first thing is this, that we definitely do have a perspective plan of the Indian Air Force, which knows what is the kind of aircraft they need and when they want to retire it. I'll give an example, a glaring one. The Avro was supposed to be retired decades back. The Air Force came out with the Avro replacement program. That replacement program ran as steam, and for the last few years we do not know why the shortlisted aircraft is not being allowed to be manufactured in India, and that too when the Indian partner and the foreign OEM are ready. They are ready to invest, and in aircraft manufacturing you have large and intensive capital expenditure. Also we have the challenge or added challenge of talent, which is needed to manufacture. Just for 56 aircraft, if the OEM as well as the Indian partner is willing to invest, why are we not doing it? Beats me. I don't understand why it is not being done. So perspective plan, yes, we have in place, but we are not able to execute that to the stage where we can make use of it. Second is the technology development roadmap. So every aircraft needs a technology development timeline. Based upon what he was just saying, like what Ajay said, there's Tejas. If now we are having a Tejas which is meeting the tactical and the technological requirements of the Indian Air Force today, it would definitely not be current 10 years from now.
Right.
So we need to have a technology development timeline which actually has to work on a very structured manner.
Sure.
Do we have it? No, we do not have it, because the public sector enterprises in India have never tried to collaborate with the private industry. They've always seen private industry as either part-time players, like guys who give them small parts, low-end technology, or competition. Now competition, because with the large corporates coming in as well. And the third part is the actual manufacture, which is the real challenge as far as I see from the industry point of view. Now I can divide this again into three. One is access to technology and talent. B is the large capex and the long gestation period required for the return on investment.
Sure.
And third is an enabling ecosystem. So these are the three challenges which can only be addressed with a collaborative effort from the government, public sector enterprise and the industry.
Absolutely. All right. So that having been said, AVM Srivastav, let's talk about this issue of procurement now. What is it that goes into procuring aircraft? What is the time frame? Do we have a time frame? When we talk about customization, are these aspects taken into consideration? How does it work really? What are the challenges?
So I actually like to call it procurement Chakravyuh. Okay. It's like a Chakravyuh, and you get out of one door, you get into another, and at the seventh door you're beaten, like it happened in our Rafale version 1. So essentially what we are trying to do, we are trying to buy aircraft as if we have some omnibus criteria available all across. See, all the aircraft which get into competition, and I have said it on earlier show also, I like to tell viewers, they all have their specialties. They're designed for their own countries, for their own air forces, and they are supposed to be very suitable for their job. Now I am trying to do the best fit, but while doing the best fit, I am constrained for the sake of my general financial regulations that I must have competition coming in. So I don't do, if I am tendering, what I am trying to do, I am trying to fix some criteria which is available across the board. The current issue, if you really take into account, the example is, we wanted to go in for 114 aircraft single engine, but the single engine was contested, so we became twin engine. Now that was not the initial criteria of the Indian Air Force, because it was trying to have a layered kind of fighter aircraft strength where the money can be utilized the best. So this being so, and this being said so, what is my take on the whole issue? That if you want to do procurement, Air Force has certain operational requirement. There are aircraft available in the with the vendors. You let Air Force choose what fits best for it, and let's have G2G. So you'll cut down at least 4 to 5 years, 6 years, because you go through the process of RFI, RFP, then you go, then comparison, then all that, and then ultimately what happened in the Rafale case? It was not only the cost. The cost of anything which is produced indigenously when you take from outside actually is more than the cost of procurement. Like Su-30, let me give the example, it's 1.8 times costlier than Su-30 if you want to buy directly from Russia. So, are we able to bear that cost of indigenization? No. So, ultimately the cost and also the quality standards for 4.5 generation aircraft, the quality standards required by HL, which is the best suited today, has to be upgraded. So, it can't be done in a hurry. So, why don't we allow Indian Air Force to choose the aircraft it wishes to have on its inventory? So, we have cut down all that thing. Let there be a G2G. Of course, then you need to activate the industry through, we got strategic policy in place. Now, when you want to apply that strategic policy, it was actually initially meant when we went through the process and rigor of developing the strategic policy, it was meant to be creating tier 1. Tier 1 is not a small thing. It's something like Raytheon, GE, Safran, Thales. They're also very big players.
Absolutely.
Okay, Avocop. So they make your wings, they make your aerostructures, they make your engines. We wanted to create that within our country so that we can be self-reliant. If you really look at the cost factor, if you, let's say there is 100 unit of money given out and it is placed on anybody, because of this tier being outside resident, all the engines will still keep coming from there.
Right.
All the aerostructures, all the material, all the other avionics equipment will still come from outside. If they come from outside, your major cost will flow out.
Absolutely. So, it's a vicious cycle
So
at the end of the day.
to have to break this, that means we need to align our strategic policy to create tier 1. If you take the case study of other countries who have succeeded, I'll take a particular in this context, I'll take the case of Japanese. If you study the thing, they have in a way said, okay, you will do this job. Let's say L&T does some job at tier 1, Mahindra does something, Reliance does something, Tata's do something. They say, okay, you do all this. Big players, very big players. Then they are bound by the what we call by our kind of regulation or something, for which we always have been thinking about National Aeronautics Commission,
Right.
which never could come into being because that was supposed to be oversighting body for all
Sure.
this. So if that body is there, they have to necessarily give it to the tier 2. Tier 2 necessarily to tier 3. So
Sure.
there has to be a waterfall mechanism. If
Absolutely.
that comes in place, then you are going to have the ecosystem where orders, as rightly was pointed out by Ratan, he's from industry. He pointed out, unless industry looks at it, what is my capex and what is my return on investment?
Right.
If that doesn't work out, it will not survive.
Sure. So Ajay Banerjee, that having been said, is it time now to look beyond HAL? Because its track record in the past hasn't been very great. So we clearly need to improve the ecosystem.
I'm a very big batter for HAL because see, HAL is one of the biggest companies we have. HAL is doing well. And what we can do is have a HAL tie up with a foreign vendor or a foreign manufacturer directly at HAL. It will do much better. We can have a system by wherein G2G, where AVM Srivastava pointed out, I will take it a step further, give you two examples. 2007 and 8, we signed 2 G2G deals. The C-17 from Boeing and C-130 from Lockheed. Both came in within few years and they are probably inducted. All of them are inducted now. And they are flying and we did a G2G deal. In this G2G, we can have a kind of a new system wherein when you have big orders like say 114 fighter jets, you can tell the company, please come and set up a plant here. And as a person who covers this beat, Frank, I can tell you most of the foreign companies are today ready. They have made an offer that they are ready to come to India and set up a plant here if they are given an order. Now, again, this boils down to what is the kind of investment. HAL is a government-backed company, can take in that load of investment by the government. Private industry can set up in and also be tier 1 suppliers in this project very easily. We have to do it now. We are out of time by at least 2 decades, in my opinion.
Okay. That having been said, Ratan Srivastava, does the private industry have the bandwidth to take on something as big as this?
So, it's a very interesting question that you've asked me, right? And I was wondering that you were going to ask me this. So, if we look at this, I agree with Ajay that HAL is one of the largest players. Now, we need to actually, at this juncture of our economy and the state we are to be a major economic superpower, we need to broad base our industry. When I say we need to broad base our industry, we have to spread the industry to the private sector, because HAL alone will not be able to do everything that we aspire to do. For example, the 900 aircrafts that we're supposed to be having and the 500, 400 aircraft is like, can we fight a twin theatre battle? Possibly cannot. And one of the reasons that Pakistan Air Force did what it tried to do and it dared to come inside and Abhinandan went down was because they understood that we are not having that 3:1 superiority. Not only that, we do not have that kind of technology. We do not have large sweeping radars which can intercept and interject from our own territory. We do not have that. They knew it, and that's why they dared. So how can we be an economic superpower if we do not have the capability to avert these kind of disasters? So the only way we can be that is to broad base the industry, and which does need private sector participation. That's one part of it. The other part of it is this, where HAL definitely has been a player, but at the same time HAL today is going and saying that our plants are going to be idle, we do not have manufacturing orders, and so on and so forth. You take for example HAL Kanpur. HAL Kanpur has a large manufacturing base. It has all the requirements that any industry needs, any aerospace industry needs. It has manufacturing setup, it has sheds, it has all the infrastructure which is available, and they have no orders. We are paying them. HAL is paying them. There's a staff over there. Now, why cannot we have a collaborative approach where the industry is allowed to take such facilities which are existing on lease? So HAL does not have to go asking for orders, but we can develop the skill sets, the talent, the access to technology in the industry. So that will help private sector take quick paces to move on to the next stage of capex. Right, capex is a big problem. So if we have those facilities today, Su-30 orders are not there. HAL is saying we'll have to close. What stops that same facility to be modified for manufacturing, let's say the current order of 100 odd aircraft that we are giving out the RFI. So what we actually again go back to that, what we need to do is that we need to collaborate, not compete with each other if we need to be an economic superpower. And we definitely cannot aim to be a superpower that we want to be without having the indigenous capability to manufacture and service our own fleet.
Okay. Closing comments now from all my guests with the best way forward. But AVM, I have a question for you. Now, this particular issue is of national importance. National security is at stake here, and also it's strategic in nature. So, considering all of these aspects, can we open it up to the private sector and open it up to investments from outside?
See, I'll just let you know, okay, I'll not be a pessimist as far as a lot of picture is coming out as I'm hearing the debate, as if we hadn't done anything and we are not doing anything. I would say, as far as government is concerned, MOD has already given permission for uses of its facilities, whether they are in ordnance factories or they are in public sector units. Whatever is available on demand, people can use it. At the moment, it is probably limited to, let's say, range firing, kind of aircraft support you need. So, government is trying to encourage industry to participate. Now, the problem of industry is order inflow. How does the order inflow? If you really look at the whole perspective, in last 5 years, what orders have come into the Indian industry or even on public sector? There are hardly any. We all have this thing. So that is one thing which government has to really quicken the pace of it. This pace does not take place because we get into the chakravyuh of procurement, what we say, that we say, okay, we'll go to the tendering route, so RFI, RFP, all these are very long gestating problems. Because of that, you get bogged down. If you have G2G kind of, you select an aircraft, you select a weapon system, you select something, you know this is best for me. Now government using its leverage of procurement, it forces that the OEM to give technology and whatever are the requirements to the concerned either private sector or public sector. But the other thing which comes in play, there are already few issues which have been raked up, which have been now balanced out. There were earlier issues of financial nature that government has done taken a lot of steps, and they have been through new DPP, they have been equated. That means a DPSU and a private sector are at the same footing. But the problem is DPSU already has the infrastructure.
Yeah.
So it can leverage the infrastructure. I was myself in a DPSU and then I was in private sector. I know the ills of both the problems. The idea being, how do I do? So then we came up with this, that I do not have qualifying mechanism with me. I need to qualify the equipment for military grade. Okay, that also came through. There is a discussion platform available, but what I think it needs to intensify, it needs to really take on shapes on a more regular, and more rigor has to come into this.
Right.
So the industry, armed forces and the government, they sit together
and they're on
they
the
find
same
out.
page.
But for that you need National Aeronautics Commission.
Okay.
Something like DARPA has to come into being. Something like DARPA has to come into being in our domain also.
Sure. Sure.
A lot of work has gone into it. On NSE, a lot of work has gone onto it. It's not that this is one of those untouched areas. For last decade plus we have been working on it. But we have not come out with this structure. That structure, once it comes in place, you will find the rigor will already start, everything will start, because industry doesn't know what exactly to make.
Sure.
And the armed forces are not so open to invite industry into all their niche areas to tell them everything, because nobody is empowered to do that.
Absolutely.
It creates a lot of other difficulties.
Absolutely. Ajay Banerjee, what's the best way forward?
Shri, I'll remind viewers that the strategic submarine in the Arihant, its hull was made by a private company. The casing of the BrahMos, the most potent missile we have in our arsenal at the moment, is made by an Indian private company. So these two examples stand out. I would say the private company has done a good job, and they will continue to do a better job. And I also want to remind and tell the viewers that unless we do not pick up pace, viewers, especially the Rajya Sabha members, the honorable members of parliament who are watching this, we have to pick up pace, bring about a strategic culture. Industry can do its job. Give them places, give them fixed targets. They will do it. They will deliver it. HAL is trying something. They have given out, so outsourced some products of the LCA Tejas to private companies. And I learned from HAL that they have made those projects and given back to HAL. HAL is now integrating them onto the Tejas. Can that model be replicated? Yes, million times over in all the products. So like HAL, it can be done in BEL, BEML, everywhere. And I think we have a formula at hand. Private industry has to be trusted in that.
Okay,
Frank.
we have a tried and tested method. Let's take that forward and ensure that it's done on the large scale, is what you're suggesting. Ratan Srivastav, close the show for us with your concluding remarks.
Right. So they have said very valid points, and there's something that I need to speak about. And I would say that the Ministry of Defence has been very forward-looking in the past few years. I'm not saying one decade back, but definitely in the last 4 to 5 years, the Ministry of Defence has been very forward-looking. And in the times of Minister Parrikar, there were really very good initiatives. A couple of initiatives that I would like to talk about is the IDDM, the indigenously designed, developed, manufacture platform that he provided for the private industry to work on a structure, as well as the strategic partnership policy, which is Chapter 7 of the DPP. Now, these are very structured formats in which the private industry can participate with the government and the defence public sector undertaking. And the Ministry of Defence has now an open portal on Make in India in Defence, and it is very forward looking as far as the industry participation is concerned. But then what could be done yesterday is being done today. So what we have to do tomorrow, again we have to do today. So the pace of this has to be really quick in case we need to modernize the Indian Air Force, as well as all its allied components.
Okay, all right then. On that note, we'll call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. What's coming out of the discussion is that modernization has indeed taken place, and there are several aspects that have been addressed in the recent past as well as far as the Air Force is concerned. A lot more needs to be done though, and we need to pick up the pace, is what the panelists are suggesting. With that, I'd like to thank my panel for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. That's it on this edition of The Big Picture. See you again next time.